Hey everyone, I really wanted to explore romancing Gale before the game released, and since it seems like it's still a little difficult in patch 9, especially if you have a tendency to lean a little evil in your games, I'm not sure if they intend to keep this difficulty or if they will fix the companion and story scenes and how they can overlap each other just a little to make his romance more accessible, but either way, I've got you covered. I'll also confess up front that there are a lot of approval points I know I missed. Some of that was because of bugs, and some of it was just me not having enough time before the launch of the game to get everything together. Either way, it doesn't matter much because if you follow this guide to woo Gale, you'll have more than enough approval to hit all of the scenes that you need. It's just going to feel kind of choppy and weird with lots of resting. In order to see every single scene, though, and unfortunately Gale's romance relies on seeing one scene in particular that you also have to see a lot of other scenes in order to see. So you basically have to play it this way, at least as of current in patch 9, and here's hoping they change it. So first off, recruit Gale and go to sleep. You should get the go to hell scene on the first night here. The next day, head along the path until you find Lae'zel being held captive by the tieflings. Deceive the tieflings into leaving Lae'zel to you. Free Lae'zel from the cage by shooting the bottom out, and then accept Lae'zel into your group. Head next door to the ruins and you'll come upon two men arguing outside. Deceive or persuade them to avoid a fight and make them leave. Explore the ruins, defeat everyone inside, and release Withers, head back outside, and take a long rest. You should see the mirror images scene where he talks about Ceramorphosis next. After that, head up to the grove, kill the goblins, and go right on inside. Use persuasion to keep Eredin and Zevlor from fighting. If you're a tiefling, there's also a race-specific option to split them up. Afterwards, talk to Zevlor and agree to help him and his people. Head past the merchant and to the group of 3 arguing tieflings. Convince the one guy to stay with persuasion or even with the tiefling option, and Gale will approve. Next, help Guex with his form. I chose insight for this one, but the strength check also works. Head to the end of the path past Guex and through the door where Arca is threatening to shoot the goblin Saza, who's in a cage. Choose the option to step between them and then persuade or intimidate Arca to back down. As if trying to give you a hint that this encounter, as well as several other in the grove, are important to him, you'll get a special dialogue from Gale afterwards showing his approval. At this point, you should be at medium approval with Gale, and given you've followed the steps in this guide so far, you should have earned Gale's trust enough to see the scene where he tells you about his condition, and that he needs artifacts to survive. You need to satisfy at least 2 encounters in the grove to see this scene, and in this case it's splitting up the fight between Eredin and Zevlor and saving Saza. Other encounters include saving Arabella and saving Myrkon from the Harpies. There might be more that I've missed, but I know at least that these 4 are the ones that always work for me to trigger the scene. So go to sleep and see his condition scene, given you're at medium approval. When he asks you to agree not to ask any questions before continuing the conversation, simply say you agree. The next day, head down towards the center of the grove to where Arabella's parents are fighting with the druids. Talk to her mom afterwards and say that the druids overreacted. Now, head inside to where Korga and Wrath are fighting over Arabella. Just save Arabella from Korga while avoiding a fight and you'll earn approval. You can fail the first roll, especially if you pass the insight check, and will get several chances to free her. Just keep trying without starting combat or doing nothing to stop it. When you're done, you might as well tell Korga that she's a monster too for some extra Gale approval, but you should be at high by now. And once you're at high approval, you can officially get the weave scene. But it can be a pain to get it to show up if you've set other events into motion already. Other scenes are constantly taking priority to it, like the second night tadpole scene, or the Raphael scene, or the Starry Night scene with Astarion if you talked to Zoro, and even Will's scene can delay it as well. If you noticed, I haven't mentioned recruiting Will yet, or using the Illithid powers, and until we know for sure that this is fixed, this is probably going to be your best bet to romance Gale. You can certainly take your chances and just make sure you rest as often as you need and hope the scene happens on its own. This didn't work for me on my first patch 9 game though. To ensure you see it, it's best to just brute force it to show without interference. You do that by staying in the grove to keep Raphael's scene from taking up a night and resting twice. Partial rests are fine, so you don't have to waste supplies, so just make a save game and rest 2 nights in a row. This will trigger the weave scene for you, which is how you can officially start your romance with Gale. The weave scene will give you many opportunities to gain more approval as well, and it's an amazing scene, probably one of my favorites in the game. First, if you're a wizard, you can say, "I quite agree," for some bonus approval about there being no deity greater than Mystra. Then, agree to channel the weave with him. Finally, when given the opportunity to get more intimate, imagine kissing him or holding hands with him for more approval. The next day, for extra Gale approval, even though you won't need any more to activate the romance, you can still activate one last camp scene with him. Help the tiefling bard Alfira finish her song without actually doing anything. Basically, help her to finish it on her own by encouraging her. You'll know you did it right when Alfira starts performing the song, and when it's done, Gale will approve. Head down to the beach and save Murkon from the harpies. With an animal speaking potion that you can buy off of Volo, go inside the grove area where Korga was again and let Silverwolf smell you. Now, because I hate the idea of sleeping 2 nights in a row again, I tried like hell to get this last scene with Gale to show up without having to do it again. It gets way too complicated after recruiting Will though, especially if you use the Illithid wisdom with him in your first discussion. So if you really want to make sure you see the lost scene with Gale, just skip a couple nights here, just like we did with the weave scene, so as not to waste too much of your time running back and forth. Once again, you can just use partial rests. You'll get the lost scene and get to learn a bit more about Gale's background. This scene isn't necessary for the romance, but if you're like me and you want to see all the scenes, you're probably going to want to see it. You can also get approval for choosing "I'm sorry for you" or that you sympathize at the end of the talk. I know as a YouTuber I'm not supposed to say this, but you can probably stop watching the video at this point. If you've followed this so far, you've solidified the romance for the camp celebration with Gale and seen all of the camp scenes. But if you're wondering about more opportunities for approval, I've got some more for you, and this is how I played out the rest of my Gale romance game. So I recruited Will and used Illithid wisdom for the first time during the conversation with him. You'll get extra approval later on down the road if you actually use the powers at least a couple of times. Then I went back to Zevlar and agreed to help him by saying I'll see what I can do. Head outside and down the road to trigger Raphael's scene, then take a long rest to regain your Illithid wisdom power. After Raphael visits, talk to Gale and ask how to beat a devil at his own game. Head down the road towards the Blighted Village, take a right to where Edwin and his siblings are, and use your Illithid wisdom on them to convince them to listen to you. Once they've left, click on Edwin's body and successfully crush the tadpole. I'm sure there might be another Gale approval point somewhere in this conversation, but I usually send them off to fight the owlbear to get Astarion approval, so I wouldn't know it off the top of my head. Head back to the main road and cross the bridge, then head to the right to find Scratch. With an animal speaking potion in use, tell him he can come to your camp if his friend doesn't wake up. And later on, when Scratch shows up at camp, obviously pet him. This used to be an exploit back in the day where you could just get endless Gale approval, but they've since fixed it, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure he approves of every little thing you do with Scratch. I remember there used to be a ball you could throw and a pouch he was holding, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get those scenes to trigger in this last game. Now go to the owlbear cave and, still having the animal speaking potion on, convince the mom not to attack you. About now is when I took another long rest, but you can save it for later if you want to get more stuff done. Whenever you do go to camp again after using your Illithid powers twice, you will get a special scene where your character is sick, and Lae'zel comes to kill you. If you pick the option when talking to her that it's just a fever and rest will help, Gale will approve. I've also heard that if you tell the group to stop using the tadpole's power the day after, that he'll approve, but I think this might only happen if Shadowheart is in the group. She wasn't in mine for this last playthrough though, so I could not verify. Head into the Blighted Village now, however you please, and towards the windmill. Persuade the goblins to leave the gnome alone. Let the gnome down and say he doesn't owe you anything. Retrieve the amethyst and give Gale the necromancy of Thay during the book dialogue. You actually have to open the book and then pick the option to place the amethyst in it, and then once you've done that, you say give it to Gale. Now, I go take a long rest, and you'll get a scene where he thanks you for the tome and then consumes it as an artifact, and you get more approval. When you first meet Karlach, pass the persuasion or intimidation check saying you're not there to hunt her. Go up to the old toll house and kill the demon hunters for Karlach, then take the Sword of Justice and give it to Gale. Obviously, it can be another artifact if you don't want to give up that sword, but you're essentially supposed to give him 2 artifacts, at least in this part in early access. I'm sure it'll probably be more later on. I wanted to test some other options for approval with the owlbear cub, but it wouldn't come to my camp, so I couldn't test whether being kind to it still gives approval or not. I literally killed every single goblin too, so that was a real bummer. You can also get approval if Gale happens to die. There's a whole ritual to complete that involves getting a pouch off his person and doing everything just so, like you have to play the notes, you have to summon the Sezik or whatever it is, and then you have to say the words to it. He approves when you do this though, and my approval was so dang high with Gale that it was up to exceptional, and I wasn't even 100% going for it after a while. I haven't even touched anything in the Underdark either, so you guys should be fine with having enough to activate the romance. I'm planning on trying to get one more romance video together before launch if I have enough time, and if not, it will come out right around launch time, I think. I'm also planning to do a stream on launch, and I hope you guys will join me for it. I'm still working out the details since I don't know exactly how long it will take to download the updates, but as soon as I know, I'll announce it on a community post. My husband also went behind my back and bought a copy of the collector's edition for me, the physical one, even after all my complaining. So it looks like we're going to have an extra copy of the game, after all, that I am going to give away at some point. So that's it for me today. Good luck, all of my Galemancers. May you be successful romancing the storm. And just for those of you who don't remember, that's a reference to that old-ass movie, Romancing the Stone. And well, you know, Gale, Storm. He even kind of looks like him. Now I kind of want to do this. Yeah, it works. Hey, I thought it was funny. In fact, it might make a good title for this video. I'll see y'all later.